Hello, I'm Terrence McNally. Welcome to Freeform, a world that just might work. And I'm going to be speaking today with Lynne Twist, co-founder of the Pachamama Alliance, founder of the Soul of Money Institute. And we're going to talk about her new book, Living a Committed Life, Finding Freedom and Fulfillment in a Purpose Larger Than Yourself. And you can learn more about all of Lynne's work and the new book at soulofmoney.org. That's soul, S-O-U-L, of money, all one word, .org. On Freeform, we explore the lives, the work, the ideas of individuals that I suspect have pieces of the puzzle of a world that just might work. We look at new, innovative, provocative approaches to business, environment, science, politics, health, culture, all based on the fact that I believe we can do better, and I want to find out how. The show streams weekly on the Progressive Voices Network on TuneIn.com. Podcasts are available anytime, anywhere on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, most major podcast sites, and at my site, terrencemcnally.net, TERRENCEMCNALLY, all one word, .net. Today's guest, Lynne Twist, and I are friends. I've known her since probably the mid-90s, and I think it was 1999 when I joined her and her husband, Bill, on one of their earlier trips with Pachamama to the territory of the Ashwa tribe in the Amazon rainforest. We had a previous conversation on Freeform back in 2003, and that one was primarily about the work and vision of Pachamama. And Lynne was joined that day by an Ashwa tribesman named Romero, who was, I think, the first of his tribe to spend a significant amount of time in the U.S. He lived several months with the Twists in their home in the Bay Area. And I found myself wondering, perhaps if it's because we're friends, that I haven't had Lynne join me more often on the show over the years. You know, you sort of shy away from, that's, you know, I don't want to give favoritism to friends, but she's certainly been involved in provocative work and written a previous book that's worthy of conversation as well. But I reached out to her on this book, Living a Committed Life, for a couple of reasons. First, Lynne believes, as I do, that we face a number of critical and even existential challenges at this time on the planet. For me, the list includes inequality, climate change, an unhealthy relationship with the rest of nature, pandemics and public health, social and racial division and tribalism, crippled government, and endangered democracy. And second, because as we reach the end of one year and the beginning of another, many of us find ourselves taking stock, looking back, looking forward. How do we live? What do we value? Many use this time to set or revisit goals and aspirations. And I think the challenge and the opportunity that Lynne sets forth in her work and in her new book is timely and eminently worth considering. As Van Jones describes it in his foreword to the book, I experienced the privilege of turning my life over to serving the highest good and experiencing the freedom and fulfillment that commitment offers. Lynne herself talks of it this way. For the purposes of this book, commitment means dedication to a cause or purpose larger than yourself. I am asking that you consider a commitment to the common good, to something that takes you out of yourself and into the realm of service. Living a committed life, and I'm still quoting Lynne, is not about doing good so that you can feel good about yourself or look good to others. It's about answering a call that creates a new context for your life. Living this way is guided by taking a stand and giving your word that you will live into that stand and have it shape your life. And that requires keeping that commitment in the face of challenges by creating a context of possibility and transformation. So this book and this message seems to be, to me, the bigger story, the upstream story, the foundation of all of Lynne's work. And I might say the work of so many of the courageous and effective individuals that I get to talk to on this program. It certainly is about climate change and the other critical challenges we face as a society, but because it's about the real world, but it doesn't dictate what your commitment or your cause has to be. Coral reefs, gun laws, poverty. It offers a way of seeing the world and your role in it and challenges you to find or hear your personal call. One of the keys to Lynne's approach is the fact that in her experience, such a commitment will do more for you than you can imagine in terms of clarity, freedom, creativity, even in terms of joy. So buckle up, join me in exploring the profound notion of living a committed life, knowing, as I think is obvious, how much the world and the future need what you have to offer. For more than 40 years, LYNNE Twist has been committed to alleviating poverty, ending world hunger, empowering the status of women and girls, supporting social justice and environmental sustainability, working with Mother Teresa in Calcutta, with refugees in camps in Ethiopia, with indigenous tribes in the threatened rainforests of the Amazon. She has served as an advisor to the Desmond Tutu Foundation and the Nobel Women's Initiative, is a co-founder of the Pachamama Alliance, founder of the Soul of Money Institute, author of The Soul of Money, Transforming Your Relationship with Money and Life, and her latest, the one we're talking about today, Living a Committed Life, Finding Freedom and Fulfillment in a Purpose Larger Than Yourself. Welcome, LYNNE Twist, to Freeform, a world that just might work.
Wonderful, wonderful to see you, Terrence, and thank you for that awesome introduction. You summarized the book better than anybody I've been interviewed by yet, and I've done dozens and dozens of interviews. So thank you for your eloquence, your intelligence, and how beautifully you put that introduction together. Thank you.
Oh, I'm touched. I'm touched. Let me tell listeners we're recording this conversation Wednesday, December 7th. So I like listeners to get a feel for the people behind the work and ideas that we talk about. So I usually start off with, can you briefly tell me about your path to the work you do today? But in this case, and in some cases, you know, of other guests as well, I think your path is such an essential part of the story that rather than the brief few sentences about it, take a little time if you want, we've got an hour, to share with us some of the moments you write about that prepared you or led you to the possibility that you could actually hear this call and accept that call.
Okay, well, thank you.
And some of this, by the way, Lynn, was stuff I'd never heard before, and it was quite fascinating to learn.
Oh, really? Okay, well, let me think of how far to go back, but I do think maybe I could start with when I was preparing for my 14th birthday, and I was a young, very active adolescent girl with a really active, full life. And my father was a great musician. He was a big band leader, and he was very charismatic, and he had a 36-piece orchestra, and he was very, very vital, and, had a big personality. And he was sort of my most beloved person on earth at that time. And, when a young girl is ending into her own adolescence and puberty, sometimes she kind of has a love affair, a beautiful, healthy love affair with her own dad. That's kind of how she discovers about men. And I did. And I played the piano, and I was the one that was the most musical of the four children. And so I felt like, I don't know if he would have said this, that I was special and all that stuff that comes with being a little girl. And the night before my birthday, we all went to bed. It was a Sunday night. And then my two older sisters and my younger brother, my grandmother and my mom, all of us in the house together. And then the next morning we all woke up except for one person, him. And he had a heart attack in the middle of the night at age 50. So quite young. My mom was totally unprepared. None of us were, because he wasn't sick. He wasn't ill. He was in his prime, like people often are in their 50s and turning 50, had just turned 50. He was just incredible. And then suddenly he was gone. And my mother went into what any woman, and she was 46 with 4 kids, and her mother was living with us, just went into total panic. And she had the orchestra, 36 men and their families to take care of. She had her 4 children. She had her mom. She had, all the fans and all the media. And it was just a huge undertaking for her. So I, like all of us, all the kids, we were sort of farmed out to friends so that she could handle the magnitude of his sudden death. And and I went to a friend. But what really where I was really harbored and the sanctuary for me was my Sunday school teacher, who was a nun, Sister Benjamin. And Sister Benjamin took me under her wing, and I grieved and cried and sobbed in her arms. And she was just the kindest, most loving, most wonderful person in the world. And we were Catholic. We were a Catholic family. We were in public school, not Catholic school. So Sunday school was important to us. And somehow Sister Benjamin was so awesome. I thought, gosh, I think maybe I should become a nun. And this was for, just kind of also because another feature of Catholicism, which I was raised in, is guilt. And I'm very good at that. I'm still quite good at it, but I was really good at it then. And when a parent dies, often if it's unexplained and it's so mysterious, he just died. He had a heart attack, but he just died with no warning.
Here today, gone tomorrow. I mean,
children start thinking it's their fault. And I thought it was my fault. I must have done something to lose my dad. So I became very, very religious. Now, I'm telling you this because I think that's when something happened to me where I realized I had an inner life. My religious, upbringing was more like the outer life. You go to church, you go to confession, you have this thing called confirmation where you wear a white dress and look like a bride. It was all about that. But then when my father died, I really discovered I had an inner life. And it was through religion, but I would now say it was the beginning of my spiritual path, my understanding the inner core of who I am. And I kept it private because I was a popular girl. I was a cheerleader. I was homecoming queen. I was president of my class. I was one of those kids that, kind of was everybody's best friend, good at everything. And so I didn't want anybody to know that I was praying all the time and going to mass in the morning before school.
You say you would get up at dawn.
I'd get up at 5:30
and then go through your normal teenage life after that.
Yeah, and I would get on my bike and I would go to the mass at 5:30 or 5 a.m. I can't remember. And then I'd come back as if for carpool, because I pretended like I just got up, and I was sort of all a little falsehood thing. Well, I had a kind of Walter Mitty inner life, parallel life. And then it was, everything was great. And then I would sometimes not go to the football games. I would go on retreat and say I was going to visit my grandmother. When I wasn't, I was going on retreat with nuns in a convent. So I had this very deep inner life and very big outer life in high school. And then, I didn't become a nun. I thought about it, especially when I saw the Nun story and the star was Audrey Hepburn. And she was so beautiful in that black and white outfit. I thought, I'd look really good in that. But then I gave it up because, that wasn't my path. And then I went to Stanford, and I pursued other things. And at Stanford, I sort of traded in religion for poetry. And I got very, very deeply engaged in Rilke, who wasn't that well known at the time. I guess maybe he was, but I didn't know about him. Rumi, Tagore, Ivor Winters was the poet in residence there. So I was very much into poetry. I won the Stanford Poetry Contest. That was kind of my deep inner life spiritual path. And then I married the love of my life, whom you know very well, Bill Twist, and we began our life together. And during that early period of our lives, I was very much about keeping up with the Joneses, because Bill became successful right away financially. And we were suddenly kind of had more money than we needed. We started having kids. I started thinking that I needed to wear designer clothes, and I needed to know about wine, and we needed to collect art, and we needed to have a BMW. I started thinking thoughts that weren't me, but were kind of out of the cultural norms for people who were young, yuppie kind of people who were starting to.
Yeah.
And then I took the EST training. So this was really significant for me. The old EST training, which is now Landmark Forum, that's what it's called now, was a very intense, very interruptive human potential invention by Werner Erhard that was highly controversial, but in my case, super effective. And it just hit me over the head like a 2x4. And I woke up and realized I was leading an inauthentic life. And I started to realize, no, I don't want to be trying to be somebody I'm not. I want to be myself. And that's when I realized I could make a difference with my life. So, I think this is all maybe more than you wanted to know. But
No, no,
anyway,
no, no. I did want, first of all, let me say I did want that because I think it's part of the story, right? In other words, not everyone will have either the spiritual inner life or the S training or those sorts of things. But I think there's always a question as to, well, but what came before that? How were you ready for that sort of thing? And let me also share, I was brought up Catholic. Had
oh, you
my
were?
time of thinking, McNally, but had my time, and I went to Catholic school for most of my years. I had that time of thinking I might be a priest. For me, it was a little younger. It was probably up through about fourth or fifth grade. I think we're very contemporary in age. My girlfriend at the time and I wrote a paper that was rooted a lot in Rilke's poetry. We wrote it
Oh,
together.
really?
Yes, I
No
handed it in at
way.
Harvard. She handed it in at Wellesley. It was actually on. I mean, this is so wild. This is our senior year, so 1968, 69. We're both taking courses at our different schools on sex roles.
Oh,
And we used Rilke as one of the main ways to talk about duality and all of that sort of thing. So I share that with you. I think, as you know, I did the S training in 74, which you may have done it earlier because you were in the Bay Area, but quite early in its origin. And I will throw in one thing we'll get to later, which is in 73, I did some work with Buckminster Fuller
oh my God.
and made a documentary about a World Game workshop that I was part of. So we share a lot of those formative years.
That is just absolutely incredible, Terrence. My God. Holy moly. Well, then, as I was the next
But no,
chapter
let
here.
me just jump in for a sec, because I think that moment when you say when you realize I don't want to live an inauthentic life creates kind of a gap. What
Yes.
then? And so
Yes.
that's kind of the moment you're at. And for some people that could be very upsetting.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'll just say I took the S training in 1974 also. It just shot me out of a cannon. And then I came home and, Bill could tell something really did happen to me. So he took it too. And then we got involved. And when I got involved in the whole est thing, which really was its own subculture, and people called it a cult, but it was really a subculture in the human potential movement. I learned so much about how to serve, how to really make a difference with my time, my life. I had little kids, so it was so inconvenient. I was assisting all the time. That was the word they used for volunteering. And that's also when I started studying with Buckminster Fuller. My God,
Because you met him through S, I believe, right?
I found him. I knew who he was. I loved him. I loved the way he was. I loved the grandfathery way he was. I didn't understand a lot of what he said, but I really loved his energy. And I had friends who knew him. And then his grandson took the S training, and I was working at S at the time, and I spotted that his grandson was taking the S training. So we got in communication with him. And then through a whole series of wonderful events with special people who were attuned to all of this, we created an environment for Buckminster Fuller and Werner Erhard to meet each other.
Right.
And that was very, very seminal for both of them. They would say that now too. Bucky's gone, but Werner's still here.
And I think for Est.
Yeah, and it was seminal for Est, and that's when Werner was struggling with how could he take all these Est graduates who had become a little bit self-absorbed, including myself.
Remember, they referred to Est as part of the me generation, the
decade,
me decade.
yes. And also the people started referring to us as, instead of holes, Est holes.
Yeah.
Because we were so transformed and so clear that we could make a difference, that we were a little bit obnoxious. And so Werner Erhard, the founder, took responsibility for that kind of culture that he had built. and said, how can I put these people to work on something outside themselves, a purpose larger than themselves? So I'm going to use the phrase of my book to say that that's really where Werner's thinking was. And when he met Buckminster Fuller, Werner was studying what are the big issues on this planet that we could take on. We, the whole Est graduate body, the community of people who'd graduated from his programs. Then he met Buckminster Fuller. Bucky was living a life to make a difference. Bucky was a little individual who knew that one little individual could have an experimental life where he could live in a way that would make a difference for all of humanity. And that was the experiment of his entire life.
And let me just jump in, because maybe you weren't going to share it, but there is a moment in Buckminster Fuller's life, which to me always reminds me of George Bailey's moment in It's a Wonderful Life, when yes. Buckminster Fuller was contemplating suicide.
Yes.
I think at age 32. His business had failed. He didn't feel like he was taking care of his family properly. He didn't understand what his role in the world was, and he was contemplating suicide and had a vision and a voice that said, you're not here for yourself. You're here for the universe.
Yep, exactly. And that's when he, instead of being he considered himself a throwaway human being. He thought if he could take this throwaway human being and dedicate it to making a difference that would impact all of humanity, he would do that instead of killing himself, which was a very good idea because he did make a difference that impacted all humanity. He invented an electric car in 1949. He invented the geodesic dome. You know, the term buckyball refers to him. He was such an awesome human being. And he was often called the grandfather of the future for those who didn't know who he was. So, Bucky Fuller meeting Werner Erhard was like two, galaxies coming together, and they recognized each other very profoundly. And I remember after their meeting, because I was involved in making it happen, Werner said it was like being in almost like a spaceship going out into space in Discovery and looking over, and there's a spaceship right next to you going the same direction. Kind of like it was like, oh my God. So they became friends and allies, and out of their relationship, in many ways, there were lots of other factors, but the Hunger Project was born. And when the Hunger Project was born was when Werner Erhard committed, I commit myself to ending world hunger. I take a stand for ending world hunger. And I was there when he said that, really publicly for the first time, or to his advisory board, I'll say. And when I heard him say that, I had such a profound just awakening. I realized this is why I was born. This is what I'm here for. A year before that, I'd heard Bucky speak, and he had talked about the distinction of sufficiency, enough, that we have enough on this planet for everybody to have a healthy and productive life, that we need to move from a you or me way of seeing the world, a mindset of scarcity, to a you and me world, a mindset of sufficiency. And that had given me a Kundalini experience. And I thought, I'm going to dedicate my life to that. And then a year later, ending world hunger showed up out of the relationship between the two of them. And that set the stage for the commitment I made really with my life, my energy, my money, my heart, my soul, my body, my family, my husband, my children, my everything, to ending world hunger. And that's when I really began, I'll say, my committed life.
Mm-hmm. And so, and I would say that notion that you got from Bucky the year earlier about sufficiency, that there is enough, that in a way it undergirds everything you've done, because that's certainly the Pachamama Alliance, and certainly Soul of Money, and this book as well. As I said, whether one chooses hunger or poverty or coral reefs or whatever it is, but that underneath idea that there's enough to go around, and the problem is politics, economics, social structures, all of that thing. But it's not because there isn't enough.
Yes, right. And it's an integrity issue that we live as if there's not enough. It's a set of assumptions that trap us into a you or me paradigm where we're all about ourselves and not about the community of life. So it's the source in many ways of all the problems we have now. It's just right at the heart of everything.
Right. And, I've obviously thought about this a lot over the years, as you have, and I can see where in our evolution, in the fact that it hasn't been that long. To us, it seems like a long time since we were hunter-gatherers, and there really was a question each day of whether there were enough. It hasn't been that long in terms of the evolution of consciousness and so on. So I understand where the perspective came from. The fact that it is encouraged and manipulated with so much is the contemporary thing we have to rise above. That okay, it's kind of back there, but do we move past it, or do we greedily, in many cases, profit from it? Briefly, and this time I will say briefly, so the Hunger Project you worked with for a decade?
25 years. 25
years. Oh my God. I didn't realize that. And how I know that your role, and we sort of met as you were towards, I guess, as I say, late 90s. So it's sort of in the latter years, or maybe just as you're moving from that to Pachamama, perhaps. But the Hunger Project was about changing our consciousness about scarcity, sufficiency, and hunger, right? It wasn't so much about a food bank as it was about changing. Was it even possible to think that we could end hunger?
Yes, exactly. To shift the very context of our relationship with the hunger issue, so that we weren't just alleviating suffering, which is very, very sacred and important work, but actually knowing that we could end world hunger. And when you work on something to completely and totally eradicate it, you work on it in a very different way. And also, the Hunger Project really acknowledged that there's the front and the back side of the hand of hunger. The front side of the hand of hunger, meaning physical hunger, malabsorptive hunger, malnutrition, starvation, seasonal hunger. The back side of the hand of hunger is the hunger for meaning, the hunger to make a difference with our lives, the hunger to matter. That's a deep, deep, deep hunger in the affluent world. And we always approach it really because of Bucky and Werner, that this hunger and this hunger are one. You can't end this one without addressing this one. You can't address this one without acknowledging and addressing this one. And that put the people of enormous affluent resource privilege in communion, not just communication, in communion with people living with scarce resources, so that we could all work together from as whole and complete human beings, rather than have and have nots, or pity, or I feel sorry for you, so I'm going to help you. No, that hunger is in the context of the way we live, that, a billion people are hungry all the time right now on a planet that has plenty of food to feed them, is unconscionable and is an integrity issue in our relationship with ourselves and the natural world, the future of life, and the human family.
And since still a billion people are at risk of hunger, how do you assess the impact of the Hunger Project?
Yeah, well, here's a really amazing set of numbers. When we started the Hunger Project, when the Hunger Project began, it was 1977, technically, on February 14th. And at that time, there were 4.3 billion people on Earth, 4.3 billion.
Half as many, basically, as we
about half. We just hit 8 billion people on the 15th. So 4.3 billion people on planet Earth, and the numbers were staggering. 44,000 deaths a day, every day, on an average. 44,000 deaths a day. Most of them children under 5. Just unconscionable. Today, and actually, I'm going to give you statistics before the pandemic, because the pandemic has changed things, and I don't have the new numbers.
Sure.
But in 2019, we had 7.6 billion people on planet Earth, almost 7.7. So 2019. And the number of people dying every day of hunger and starvation went down. It was down to 16,000 a day. So 4.3 billion people, 44,000 people a day, 7.6 billion people, 16,000 people a day. So the hunger issue was going up in 1977, and as of the year 2000, it really started to go down. Fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer people are unable to feed themselves and their families, and those with more and more people on the planet. So those statistics show the trajectory that hunger is actually ending. Now, this disruption of the pandemic, there's new numbers now that I don't have. This disruption of the Ukrainian war, of course, exacerbates all of that. However, in the largest possible context, we are still on the trajectory of less and less and less people dying of hunger and starvation, less and less people not having access to food, water, shelter. And what's really key is the capacity to feed themselves, self-reliance and self-sufficiency, which is ultimately the goal, not through aid, but through people being able to take care of themselves and their family. That's the ultimate goal of the Hunger Project, that everybody has a chance for a healthy and productive life. So the direction, the trajectory went from it was getting worse and worse and worse and worse to now it's actually has been for some time, the beginning of the end. So
right. Which means that from a time when you couldn't see the end and didn't imagine the end to, as it trends this direction, one can see an end. And that's the change in consciousness. Let me tell people, this is Free Forum, a world that just might work. I'm Terrence McNally. I'm speaking with LYNNE Twist about her new book, Living a Committed Life, Finding Freedom and Fulfillment in a Purpose Larger Than Yourself. And you can learn more at her site, Soul of Money, the word soul, S-O-U-L, of money, all one word, .org. You know, that thing that you said about the two sides of the hand, hunger, physical hunger, and if you will, spiritual or meaning hunger. It seems to me that those two sides, or that way of seeing two sides, applies to Pachamama, applies to money, applies to everything once we really start looking at it. What I'd like you to do briefly, and then we'll delve deeper into the book and what it offers others, is briefly Pachamama, briefly Soul of Money.
Briefly, Pachamama. Pachamama, the word Pachamama means Mother Earth. And the Pachamama Alliance is an alliance between the indigenous people of the sacred headwaters region of the Amazon rainforest and conscious, committed people in the modern world, global modern world like you and the people listening to this, for the long-term sustainability of life. That's what Pachamama Alliance is. Working hands-on with people in the sacred headwaters of the Amazon rainforest, the beginning of the Amazon that sources the whole Amazon system. And then out of the wisdom and lessons learned from indigenous people in that beautiful partnership, educational programs that we do in 88 countries to awaken people to how they can participate in transforming our current situation. And our mission is to bring forth an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, socially just human presence on this planet. So it's a big mission and a big vision, and that's it. So that's Pachamama Alliance.
One day just happened to be in a bookstore. I moved from Los Angeles to Long Beach, happened to be in a bookstore, and there was a little sign that a local Pachamama group was getting together, and they were talking about Drawdown. Paul Hawkins, who we both know and so on, has been on to talk about Drawdown and to talk about regeneration and so on. And it was just, that was when I said, oh, it's on the ground. It's taken off. It's people doing it themselves.
Yes.
Which is great. Okay. Soul of Money.
Well, the Soul of Money Institute really got founded out of the book I wrote called The Soul of Money, really distinguishing the condition of scarcity, the mindset of scarcity that we all are swimming in, from the reality of what we have and what we don't have, and then really bringing forth this distinction that Buckminster Fuller was such an icon for, of sufficiency, enoughness. And the Soul of Money Institute is designed, we have programs, writings, talks, coaching that helps people dwell in the context of enough, the context of sufficiency, to abandon the mindset of scarcity, be in the exquisite experience of knowing that our needs are met by the universe, And out of that, there's the overflowing power of making a difference with your life and living in a state of gratitude, sufficiency, and generosity. So it's an institute. We work with people of enormous wealth who are just sometimes miserable and caught in the chase of more wealth. We work with people who can't make ends meet. We do fundraising trainings for people working in the in what I call the social profit sector, and we have a particular sweet spot in courses with women and men. But right now we have a sweet spot with courses with women who are ready to really swing out. I call this the Sophia century, which I could talk about. And so we're recognizing the deep and profound divine feminine values that are emerging in both men and women, and validating them, drawing them out, so that we tone down the patriarchy, kind of uplift yin and tone down yang, and start to address these big problems we have in the world.
Okay. Something that we've mentioned before, but I want to focus on now, is it seems to me that someone listening to this conversation even might say, well, Stanford, money, Bay Area, blah, 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 and say, easy for you to say, Lynn Twist, right? Talk a bit about privilege and how this works for someone who is not of privilege, and also the other side, which is your experience with Mother Teresa.
Well, first of all, I'll just say, I understand that it may come across as, well, easy for her to say. And I bow to that, and I humbly accept that concern. At the same time, I have witnessed in my life, working with hunger and poverty, working with Mother Teresa directly, working with people who can't even figure out how to feed their own children, people who've lost their children to starvation, working with indigenous peoples in the Amazon facing oil companies with all their strength when they can't even read or write or speak Spanish. I've worked with people who have so much courage. And I will take the opportunity, if I can, Terrence, to say that when I first started working in the Hunger Project, I used to think that you could call someone poor, that we were going to work with poor people, and until I met them. And then I found out that there's nothing poor about them. They're strong, they're committed, they're creative, incredibly creative, they're imaginative, they have deep relationships, they know what they love, they know what they care about, and they exhibit more courage to live through a day than you and I are going to need in our lifetime. To call them poor is to diminish them and to diminish those of us who would see them that way and not see the wholeness of each and every human being. And what's poor is their resources, not them. And those poor resources, often tragic resources, often war. I mean, I worked a lot in Africa, Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and India, Bangladesh, places like that, Ethiopia, Ghana, Senegal, Guinea-Bissau. Those harsh circumstances create environments where the inner strength is so powerful, the inner resolve, the capacity to find a way through is the kind of stuff we all go to workshops for. So, that I know, not just in those circumstances, but also in the United States, because I work with people, teachers who aren't getting paid enough, single moms who have 2 jobs and 3 kids. I work with people on issues that really are the hardcore, how do we make it work? How can I do this? And I still say to all of us, when you have a vision, a purpose larger than your own life, this beautiful thing happens to you, and the pain pushes you towards your vision, and the vision pulls you out of the pain. There's a wonderful phrase in the book that I cite from Michael Beckwith: pain pushes until vision pulls. And it's true. And so anyone can make a difference with their life. You can be the best bus driver in Chicago, which I think I told the story of my husband always took this one bus because the bus driver made everybody on his bus laugh. He was this big, wonderful African-American man. He would give them the best good morning hug. And Bill would just race to the bus stop to get on this guy's bus because this guy, Joe, made everything work. And he was there to make the world work. And his world was his bus. So anybody can have a context larger than your own life, a purpose larger than your own life, rather than being in your own life starring you. And so I can't remember the question you asked me, and even if I'm answering that, but that's really anybody.
Well, no, you answered the question I asked, which was, how does this all relate to privilege? And then, but it was interesting, the incident that you had with Mother Teresa, where you found you saw the wealthy differently.
Yes. Wow, that's a good one. Well, that's a long story, and I'll give you the short version. I was lucky enough to be in India working on ending world hunger and realized that, oh my God, I was a Catholic. I'm not anymore, but I was. I even thought about becoming a nun. Maybe in this, wonderful world of ending world hunger that I will meet Mother Teresa. That's kind of we're in the same business, kind of. And one of my friends in one of my hunger project, wonderful Indian friends in Jericoitra said, "Oh, I know Mother Teresa. I'll introduce you." And I was just shocked and a little bit terrified and intimidated because I hadn't been to church in 15 years. So I thought, oh my God, I got to go to confession and got to take a bath in holy water. And, I was just certain that I was too, non-Catholic to meet with her. But anyway, I found a way, and I went to see her in her orphanage in Delhi. And, in the very beginning, she wasn't even there. And the nuns asked me to help out because they had so many babies to take care of, girls under 2 primarily. But then she did return. And when I had my meeting with her, which was absolutely an experience of bliss, we sat in a dark hallway, a very modest place where she had this orphanage, and 2 chairs and a little wooden table in between. And I was in this kind of euphoria of love and holiness and sacred reverence for this living saint, in this conversation with her, holding her hands, crying, sobbing in her arms almost, about what a privilege it was to be in her presence, etc. And then right in the middle of this beautiful, blissful, incredible moment of unconditional love for her and love for everything, everywhere, I heard a scuffle behind me, like a scuffle and loud voices, almost like a little bit of a violence. And shouting. And when I turned around, I saw these very large people, Indian people, a very large Sikh man. Sikh men wear a turban, and he had a big, giant topaz right in the middle of his turban. So I knew they were wealthy. And what I think was his wife, who was opulently dressed in a very beautiful sari, but she was over perfumed, over made up, very heavy makeup, over bejeweled. She had a diamond in her nose and a diamond that went all the way to her, diamonds all the way to her ear. And here's Mother Teresa in the middle, all bent over with osteoporosis. And I take the picture. And then she does the inexcusable. Mother Teresa had osteoporosis, so she was all bent over for most of her adult life. This woman goes like this. Mother Teresa, put your chin up for the picture. She goes like this and holds Mother Teresa's chin up like this. And I take another picture. I shot the photo, and then they left. I handed her the camera. She grabbed it, actually, and they left. They didn't say thank you. They didn't kiss her hand. They didn't kneel before her. They didn't anything. They just left. And I was so upset. I'm upset talking about it. And then Mother Teresa sat down as if nothing had happened. And she was just fine. I was not fine, but I pretended to be fine. My blood was boiling, veins were bursting in my forehead. But I sat down, and we finished our meeting. She gave me what's called a scapular medal. You know what that is?
Yep, I do.
For my mother. And said she would pray for my mother and pray for my son, who was ill at the time, and hugged me, and then escorted me back to the door. And then I got in my little taxi that was waiting for me, and I went back to my hotel in Old Delhi, New Delhi, which was 45-minute drive, thank God, because I was fuming. And as I calmed down and calmed down a little bit more and calmed down a little bit more as the minutes passed, I realized, oh my God, I was in a state of unconditional love for everyone, everywhere, all things, every possible human, every possible plant, animal that ever lived with Mother Teresa. And then those rude, horrible people came into the space and I hated them. I hated them. And I was in the space of unconditional love and profound hate in her presence. And that's not what she was doing at all. She stayed totally centered. So I wrote her a letter thanking her for the meeting and thanking her for the teaching that I received from the way she was with those people. And she wrote back and she said, Lynn, there's Christ in every face. And then read the quote.
You must expand your circle of compassion to include the rich and powerful. Open your heart to them. Do not shut them out. They are also your work.
Yeah, she said, I'll just embellish that a little bit. She drew a circle. This is your circle of compassion. It has limits. It's towards the poor, towards the underserved, towards the marginalized. That's natural for you. But you can expand that circle of compassion to include the wealthy, the rude, what you just said. And then she said, that's really who you are. And she was acknowledging me, actually. And then, she gave me the assignment to extend my compassion to them. And it became the mission of my life, really.
That's what I see. When I saw that, when I read about that incident, I saw that's there's up until then, and in a way there's after that, which then allows you to, I think, see privilege and lack of privilege in a different way, and I think in a way that actually has possibility in it.
Well, here's another thing she said. I can't remember if I put this in the book, but I should have. She said the vicious cycle of wealth can be as intractable and as painful as the vicious cycle of poverty.
Yeah, she talked about a prison of privilege.
Yes, yeah. And I really know that now because I am working right now with several billionaire families, and they are, they have plenty of resources, yes, but their inner resources have been replaced by outer resources, so they're starving inside. And people don't treat them like normal people. They don't know who, if anybody's really their friend. Their children are, in many cases, addicted to stuff. They have abandonment issues. They can't find normality. It's really not healthy to have that massive amount of money. It's not good for anybody. It's certainly not good for our economy. It's not good for us. It's not good for inequality. It's definitely not good for them. They're suffering more than anybody can possibly imagine.
Right. Well, one thing I often say, Lynn, is that what human beings want more than anything is to feel seen and heard.
Yes.
And when you are identified by your wealth, you will no longer be or be able to experience that feeling of being seen and heard. And so it's such a core need. We've got about 5 minutes left. This has just flown by. If I were someone saying to you at this point, Lynn, okay, what if I'm going to take on this thought of maybe it is time to commit my life to a purpose larger than myself? We're saying I'm going to, this program will play right around the turn of the year when I think people are looking at those sorts of things. What are some of the key things you would say to them to help them in that moment, in that moment and in their taking on of it, and some of the challenges they're probably going to face, but how they move forward?
Well, I'll just say, for those of you who are clear you have a purpose larger than your own life, bravo, and let's deepen and expand that. For those of you who are not, for people who are listening and don't know what that is and are ready to maybe do that, look and see what breaks your heart. That's a good place to start. What calls to you? What breaks your heart? What's the pain that's pushing? What's the vision that pulls? To use that wonderful quote. Also to look back in your childhood, what really touched you when you were little, because that doesn't go away. It gets covered over, we get discouraged, we get hopeless, but that doesn't go away. There's something, and you can volunteer and experiment, but it needs to be something that you feel you're of service, that it's larger than your own life starring you. It's not about whether or not you're okay, because when you're doubting whether or not you're okay and whether you're cool enough or young enough or thin enough or all that stuff, that can consume your life and just be miserable. You can't ever get out of that. But when you have something larger than your own life, all that noise moves to the background. What you're up to moves to the foreground, and you don't have time to entertain all those thoughts anymore. You got to get with it. You got to get going. And the commitment comes back and shapes you into who you need to be to fulfill it.
That's one thing you say that's critical, is that you don't have to be ready. You don't have to have your ducks in order. You don't have to have the resources gathered or the plan even. Yeah.
And it's about how you feel, what makes your eyes fill up with tears, what moves your core. We all have that, and we maybe have many, many things like that. Any one of them, if you get engaged in it, really engaged in it, and discover what's your role. I have this belief, I think it's a belief or an assertion. Let me say it's assertion. I propose that if you're alive today, you have a role to play, and that all these crises that we're working on, or that you're not working on, but all these crises we're living through, there's a role for you. There is one. You have a role to play. It maybe is not a big role or a small role. It's just your role. And if you play it, it's an all hands on deck time. You will find a kind of fulfillment and a freedom. It won't trap you. It'll free you into who you need to be, who you want to be, who you hope you are. You'll become that. So I recommend it.
And then one other thing, you talk about Sati Bhagavati. This is once someone begins to tread that path. You quote her as saying, "Learn to drink as you pour, so the spiritual heart cannot run dry, and you always have love to give." Talk just a bit about that.
Well, this is not about sacrifice. This is about fulfillment, including your own. This wonderful phrase, "the world could possibly work," that you say that is the name of this program.
A world that just might work.
It just might work. And I was on Vicki Robbins' interview. She says, "What could possibly go right?" That's her question.
Yeah.
And the publisher of my book, Barrett Kohler, their mission is a world that works for all. So I say that there is this experience of generating possibility and knowing that anything is possible no matter what. And that's the kind of world that we want to live in. That's really what she means, is drink as you pour, that world includes you. If we're making the world work for everyone with nothing left out, that's it. You're in it too. It's not about you and everybody else. It's about you and everybody else. It's a you and me world. You take care of yourself so that this instrument that you've been given can continue to be useful, can be constantly replenished, and is part of the picture of making the world work.
Yeah. As I say, generosity is what we're talking about here, but it begins with generosity to yourself.
Yes.
To believe you can, to give yourself permission, all of those sorts of things, that you will not be as generous to others if you are not generous enough to yourself. We got to bring it to a close. The book is Living a Committed Life, Finding Freedom and Fulfillment in a Purpose Larger Than Yourself. And you can learn more about all of Lynne's work and the book at soulofmoney.org. Soul, S-O-U-L, of money, all one word, .org. For this conversation and many other interviews and articles, to join me in pursuit of a world that just might work, go to TerrenceMcNally.net, TerrenceMcNally.net, or aworldthatjustmightwork.com. They're the same website. Also, if you want to get an email announcement from me telling you who's going to be on, what we're going to talk about, and usually links to 10 articles that'll flesh out that conversation, email me at temcnally, TEMCNALLY, at mac.com, or you can sign up at my website. You can sign up for the podcast at most podcast sites or at my site. And the podcast archive includes, Michael Lewis, Naomi Klein, Bill McKibben, Van Jones, Connie Rice, Greg Boyle, George Packer. There's years. I've been doing this since 96. You can also follow me on Twitter at McNally Terrence. Thanks to Keanu Williams in production, George Vasilopoulos at Progressive Voices, and most of all, you, my listeners. Please share this podcast widely. And finally, Lynn Twist, keep up your good work.
Thank you so much, Terrence. It's so great to be with you. I just love you to pieces.
Thank you. The feeling is mutual. And it's a little premature, but I think by the time we run it, let me say Happy New Year.
Thank you. Same to you. Take care.